So our first guest is going to be Roger Enriquez, Director of Criminal Justice and Policy Studies Center, Preserving Your Home for Future Generations. He is going to do the presentation. If you would like to ask questions when the presentation is going on, he's okay with stopping and answering your questions. All I ask is that so that we can keep time, not to go on too long, so that we can have enough time for everybody else. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank you for coming out. I know that this is, part of your meeting. Just a little bit about the space. Graciela's here, so she could tell you much more about it than I can. But the reality is that UTSA, because of the efforts of many of the folks in this room, saw fit to have a facility inside the community. And so this is the response to that. And so we're very grateful. This is something that I've now used this space quite a bit. We're trying to get more folks to use it, to do outreach into the community. But, it's been a slow process. But nonetheless, thank you for coming out, and please view this space as your home as well. If you need it for whatever other occasions or what have you, other community meetings, outreach, or whatever the case may be, you can get a hold of me through Velma, or I have some information here at the end that you can reach out as well, right?
Since you mentioned my name, I just wanted to say this was also a building that they were going to tear down, and we fought 3 or 4 years to save it. And so, when
I was in Lanier High School, and when I was here, Speedy's got closed, Speedy's Food to Go over here, and they were over here for a little while. So I remember coming here and having fried fish on Fridays during Lent. So it's amazing the space looks completely different. It looks fantastic now. So, hopefully for many, many generations to be able to use, and we're just excited about it. So my name is Roger Enriquez. I'm an associate professor at UTSA. My appointment is in criminology and criminal justice, but I'm also the director of the Policy Studies Center. And about now 2.5 years ago, Councilwoman Gonzalez came onto the campus at UTSA and said, look, university is here. You guys should be doing stuff to help the community that surrounds you, right? And we said, no, absolutely. We're very interested in doing things related to that. Part of my research is also involved, but as many people on the West Side say, look, we've been studied to death. I mean, we already know all the problems. You're not telling me anything that I don't already know. What we need is actual concrete help, right? And so we said, well, there's a number of different things. Since one of our priorities was housing, we had done a study many, many years ago with this issue that I'm going to talk about tonight. And so with the help of MiC, Shirley Gonzalez, the Neighborhood Housing Services, we undertook this project, right? The second thing now that I have to say is that I'm a professor at UTSA, and I'm also an attorney, right? And the reality is, while I am a lawyer, I'm not your lawyer, okay? So I'm going to be discussing tonight legal issues, related. No worries. What we'll be discussing tonight is issues related to real property, and I can speak authoritatively about them because, as I said, I'm an attorney, but I'm not your attorney, okay? Each circumstance is different. Each circumstance requires very specific advice on your particular deal, okay? So, having said all that, let's talk about today's topics. The first thing we're going to discuss is how to maintain a clear title on your home. And you might be saying, of course I have a clear title on my home. I've owned my home for 40 years. What could you possibly tell me about having a clear title to my home? Unfortunately, what we found is that many folks have been victims of identity theft, and they're unaware completely that maybe someone opened a credit card, and if they're unaware of that, they're also unaware that someone may have had a default judgment against them, And then when it comes time to borrow against the house or sell the house, then these liens pop up. There's also liens related to weeded lot liens or cleanup or any one of a number of different things. So it is important to make sure that you have that. We'll talk about the best way to transfer property. One of the things that, I'll talk about, well, let me just get through this and then we'll discuss that in a second. And then what happens if you don't have a plan? Many folks say, well, I have a will already. Well, we'll talk a little bit about a will and if that's the most efficient way to do it. We'll talk about families who find themselves more at risk to this. And then we'll talk a little bit about home flippers as well. People who buy a home and then turn around and sell it for a profit. I want to acknowledge Councilwoman Gonzalez who stepped in.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to say a few words. This will be
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to see such a big crowd to discuss these really important issues that we've been working on for many, many years now. I think what Dr. Enriquez's the work that he's done with the students, I know we early on, in fact, helped. Last report I had, we had cleared about 120 titles.
We're over 200 now.
So 120 titles since we started the program a year and a half ago, maybe?
We started in April of 2018 in earnest.
So I'm really grateful that we were able to do that, and it was one of the many activities that we wanted to do in conjunction with UTSA. When Dr. Amy became the president there, we talked about some transitional things, and one of them was the issue of clearing title. We also did a lot of work to get certified contractors, and I could go on and on about many of the housing projects that we've done, but I know here today you guys have an agenda and that you'll want to hear from Dr. Enriquez about the work that he's done. But it's been a great partnership. I look forward to the continued partnership with UTSA. In fact, I don't know if you already also announced that they were going to do a 8-week online course for construction rehab of old properties, or of older properties like the ones in our district, because that was one thing that was still lacking, was we didn't have enough people able to do that work. So we're looking forward to that one next. Oh, and I'm glad we have friends. And that you children probably much better behaved than mine. But I was grateful that I could join you all today, and I'll be here as long as they can stand it. So, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So these are the sort of topics that we'll cover. So why would I even discuss this idea of a clear title? Well, maybe not in this particular room, but you know someone right now who either inherited a property from someone and perhaps they did not go through all the processes in order to get that property in their name, right? So maybe the mom died, the daughter had been taking care of the mom for many, many years, and then as a result of it, the mom passed away. Well, the daughter just pays the taxes, it goes on, etc. We find that a lot of these situations are not just a single generation, but multiple generations. In other words, now we're getting to the point where even the daughter is now in her 60s or 70s, and now they need to figure out, so now we're basically compiling one problem on top of another, okay? So we want to make sure that you have a nice clean title. There's several different ways to find out if you do. One is obviously to call a title company and speak to a representative. That'd be Alamo Title, any one of those. They do charge you though. That's like $150, something along those lines. If you have some computer savvy, right, and you can go online, there's actually a link. We don't have Wi-Fi yet here, but would it work, Rich, or no? The search tool.
Yeah, it will.
It will. I'm gonna regret this, but I'm gonna.
Just use the mouse. Use the mouse.
Okay, Rich, I'm listening. Rich says use the mouse. And so, just to give you a little flavor of what this looks like. And so that's the search tool. Let's use President Amy as our example since his name's kind of unusual. And then we type in his name, Taylor, right, his first name. And then we just click search. No results found. Okay. That's not what should happen. Let me try it. I must have misspelled something. Actually, I think what I normally do, because I discovered something, it would have helped if I had spelled that right. Right? So this is, again, just an example to show you what this would actually look like. So President Amy has a very unusual sort of name, so not very many things pop up. If your name's Carlos Rodriguez, you're going to get about 50 different things that pop up. But as you can see, you can very quickly tell what's going on with your property just based on the name. And many people in this initial stage discover issues related to the title of their property. So again, I'm not going to go much further with that, just to let you know that that's one way of doing it. The other way to do it is, if you'll notice here at the, there's an address, and this is what we call the new courthouse. The new courthouse in Suite B109, they will do up to 5 searches for free for you. Okay? So you can go down there and say, hey, my name is, Carlos Rodriguez. I own this property. Can you help me make sure that there's no liens or anything on my property? And they're happy to help you, but only 5 searches. Right? They'll only do 5 different searches, so, because their time is also valuable. But usually, that's more than enough to figure out if you're okay or not, all right? All right, so what else? All right. We figured it out. Good news, no liens on our property. We're good to go. Well, not exactly, because what we want to do is, you probably already know, and I'll talk about it here in a little bit, is that there are a lot of folks very interested in your home. Maybe people have been sending you cards or letters. The last time that I did this presentation, a gentleman pulled out his cell phone and he showed me where someone had texted him. And he said, Ralph, I'm interested in your property if you're interested in selling. I said, sir, how did this man get your number? And he says, I have no idea. But he called them and said, sell me your house, basically. So these folks are quite aggressive. So what we are trying to do and accomplish here is, many of the people here don't want to sell. In fact, what they want is to leave their home for their next generation, right? Homes are increasingly getting more and more expensive. But here's a free and clear house in pretty decent shape, or maybe not even in decent shape, but certainly very clear to, convenient, etc. So we want that. We want to help folks keep their home. This is very important so that the social, cultural fabric of the community doesn't change, right? We want to make sure that there are enough folks who know the community and understand what it is that we find valuable to stay here. So they say, well, you know what? I'm going to leave it in a will. I'm going to leave a will to, Carlos Rodriguez wants to leave it to Carlos Rodriguez Jr. And he writes out a will and he has a will done. Well, wills are free to draft, right? No, not exactly. You should have the assistance of a lawyer. Oh, but they're free to get probated, right? No, you must get the help of an attorney. Oh, well, but the attorney can do it and then that's the end of it. No, the attorney goes before probate court and they have to get all of these things formalized. From what we hear is folks are reporting back to us that it can cost as much as as little as $2,500 to as much as $4,000 or $5,000, depending on the complexity. We have folks who come and see us at MiC and say, well, we had a will, but we didn't have the money to probate the will. Well, what effect did that have? There's a 4-year statute of limitations to probate a will. If you don't do it in 4 years, I'm not saying you cannot do it. What I'm saying is it gets much more complicated to do it. In other words, more money, more expensive, more time consuming. Well, then wills are bad? No, wills are not bad. But 2 years ago, the state of Texas allowed us to create another form of transferring property to our loved ones other than a will. We call it the transfer on death deed. Now, many people think, well, is this like a gift deed? No, it's not a gift deed. It's different than a gift deed. A gift deed, as you can see, does ownership transfer immediately? It does. So let's say mi hijo's taking you to the appointments and he's se está portando muy bien and everything. You say, well, I want mi hijo to have the house. And then so you transfer the house to him with a gift deed. But then all of a sudden, Mijo gets married, he doesn't want to take you to the appointments, and you're like, Mijo, I want the house back. You can't get it back. It's not revocable. That once that house gets transferred, you lose the house. That doesn't happen with the transfer on death deed. The transfer on death deed can be revoked. So 1 week, se está portando bien, and you transfer. The next week, he's not. You revoke it and do a new one and leave it to the daughter. So it leaves you the opportunity. If you have a gift deed, you're going to lose your over 65 exemption, unless they're 65 as well. If you have a disabled exemption, you'll lose that as well. In other words, your property tax would actually go up if you did a gift deed. The other ones are not important. We're not going to talk about capital gains, so we'll just leave that alone. The thing is these scenarios, if you don't plan for them, can become very complicated. This is me, that you didn't figure that out. And here we're trying to, this is a real world where we're finding that some people own 7/48 of a property because of what happens. Now you might say to yourself, how is it that someone ends up with 7/48 of a piece of property? Well, if you've been married more than once, right, you fall in what we call a risk category. So if you've been married more than once, there might be issues there. If you've had children from more than one union, in other words, in your wild young days, you had, you're a regular Johnny Appleseed and you have a kid or whatever somewhere else, and all of a sudden you pass away and they show up and they say, where's my part, right? If this tends to complicate things, if brothers and sisters start moving out of state, because if they end up inheriting the property and they live in Dearborn, Michigan, how are you guys ever going to reach any kind of an accord on what to sell it, who to give it to, how to rent it, how much to charge for the rent, who's going to fix the roof, who's going to cut the grass, who's going to do any of those things? And then it gets it gets complicated and you can end up with a very small fraction. If one of the kids dies, right? Imagine that you predeceased one of your kids and they had children. Well, now all of a sudden that share, let's say you had 8 kids, that 1/8 gets divided by how many kids they had. So you can see that very quickly this can get very complicated, right? So one of the things that we recommend, and this is where the portion so we obviously, based on the presentation, you can tell that we think the transfer on death deed is a very valuable thing for folks in the community. Even if you say, well, I'm nowhere near dying, as was evidenced, unfortunately, by the events that happened yesterday with Kobe Bryant, anybody can go at any time, and we should all, especially since this is an opportunity, we're affording everyone an opportunity to do it at little or really no cost, okay? So the transfer on death deed works like this. You decide who will take the property now. And it only comes into effect when you die. So you can change your mind, you can put someone else, etc. So the transfer on death deeds are, as part of our program that we work through with Councilwoman Gonzalez, MiC, Neighborhood Housing Services. We work through MiC's offices at 978-0500. You don't need to write it down. I'm going to show it to you in just a second. We help folks with transfer on death deeds because you may not need help clearing your title, but we can help you to prevent you from finding yourself in the situation where your family needs to clear title. So it's sort of a measure that avoids all of that situation. Because of the assistance, we do that for free. We've also received, or MiC has received some assistance from not councilman, but Commissioner Justin Rodriguez, whose office is just down the street here, to actually also pay for the recording of those documents, okay? So, because it costs money to record these documents. And so there's a fund for that, and for folks who are interested in doing that, so it won't cost you anything to draft them, and it won't cost you anything to record them. These things must be recorded, because if they're not recorded, they have no effect, right? So, this is part of the presentation that we have. I do want to, because it is somehow related, this is I have a slide here somewhere, there it is, on 78207, because I did a presentation the other day, that's why 78228 was up. But I wanted to mention this because people who don't have clear title to the home are more susceptible to individuals who are interested in flipping the property. Now, 78207 is not what we would say is fully in gentrification mode, but it is very gentrifiable, okay? In other words, the potential is there. These numbers, so we did a study over 4 years from 15 through 18, and we found that 49 houses were flipped in 78207. Of these, 69% were resold within 6 months of purchase. So they bought them and flipped them within 6 months. The median price, and you can see that this is going up, and actually I'm aware of I have the data for 2019, and this has also gone up again. But you can see that the median price, right, what they paid for it and what they sold it for is quite different, and there's some hefty profits, right? These folks sold their homes at half their actual value, okay? So, why am I mentioning this to you? If you don't plan, if you don't have a contingency plan, you want people to inherit the home, not the headache. And so many of these folks prey on individuals who, are kind of at their wits' end because there's 6 brothers and sisters. Nobody can decide what to do with the property. And then some guy sends them a letter and says, look, I'm interested, I'll buy it for cash. Well, even if you list it with an MLS, you're gonna get cash anyway. So, that's not really, but what they do is they leverage that headache to bring down the price, and as a result of that, an asset that we could have retained in the community, that could have been a home where people could, again, raise kids and send them to school, is off the market and sold to who knows who, right? So this is an important aspect of all of that. I just want to leave this number up. This is the number that I promised, which is 978-0500. When you call that number, that's the MiC Housing Center. And the MiC Housing Center helps folks with a lot of different things. Now, I don't know what type of help you need. I don't know if you have nice clear title to your home. I don't know if you're just interested in a transfer on death deed. But I know that you know someone that needs our help, right? Because when we did the block walking campaign with Rich's group and other folks, we did it just in 78207, and we identified over 2,000 homes that probably need our services just in 78207, right? So even though you may not need our service, there's definitely someone that you know that needs our service. And so, I'm open for questions, or if you have any about any of these transfer on death deeds or affidavits or any of that.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Okay, some of the people are becoming homeless because of the tax collector.
Right.
I'm working on helping someone. They owe $6,000. This lady is completely disabled. And she inherited property from her father.
Mm-hmm.
And because she owes money to the tax collector, there's no way we can help her as far as getting a new roof or weatherization.
Right.
So there's a lot of things that you can do for her. And therefore, she's becoming homeless because the house is not.
This is exactly the problem that we're trying to avoid. Now, I don't know her particular case specifically, but I will venture to guess that she does not have clear title. She inherited it informally, because many of the folks that we help, and we're going to, now that we have a little bit of traction and we've helped enough people, we're going back to see how many of them took advantage now of weatherization. How many of them took advantage of the plumbing program? Because they didn't have access to any of that, because guess what? You have to be the owner of the property. And while they were informal, right, they informally owned it, they did not have legal title. The bank is interested in loaning money on equitable title or legal title. Legal title, right? They're not interested, well, I have equitable ownership of the property. We don't loan money to people who don't have legal title. So what I'm saying is that, imagine if we could get in a time machine, right, and go back to before her mother died and created a plan that would leave it 100% in her name or someone, she would have the capacity, A, to borrow money to pay the back taxes if she needed to. She could take advantage of weatherization. She could take advantage of a myriad of different programs. So the first thing she would have to likely do is make sure she has clean, marketable title in order to qualify for all of these programs or loans or whatever. And I mean, that's a case-by-case basis. We would have to see, you know, what is exactly her situation.
Using example 78237, that's my zip code. A while back, that was considered suburb, and recently it's been designated. But during that time, it wasn't considered part of the city code. A lot of people build structure.
Mm-hmm.
And is there what do you call, where you can go back?
Right.
And
So one of the things, and Councilwoman Gonzalez alluded to it, I'm tangentially involved because it's going through the Policy Study Center, but it's actually through the Construction Science Department of the College of Architecture at the University of Texas at San Antonio. And we are embarking on, because here's the problem. You had code from 1960, and you have code from the year 2020. These codes are fundamentally different, right? So there needs to be a bridging of understanding code as it was and code as it is today. There is a gap, a tremendous gap, of qualified contractors to do the kind of work. One, why? Because the best capitalized, the ones with the most money, the contractors with the most money, are not interested in doing repair work around here. So what happens? Well, Fulano, who does foundations, and everybody knows him. Now, Fulano does not have a permit, but he does it for a reasonable price. And then, you know, the cities come in and cited these individuals. We want to help get these folks, you know, under the city's roof to understand the code, what they had before, what they have today, and how to bridge that in the most economical way possible, right? Because these homes, if we're fortunate enough to keep enough of them, are going to have to be repaired. And we need a cadre of contractors who are ethical, reasonable, and understand code as it was and code as it is today in order to be able to be successful. Because we want these homes to be enjoyed for many, many, many generations to come. So yes, that is a major problem. The age, for example, there's a lot of what we would say aging housing stock in this area. But there's a lack of individuals who can repair them and bring them up to code. And if they exist, they're not very economical. So this is something, again, I'm only, I'm involved in it, but I'm not completely involved. That's coming, that's Dr. Rogelio Arias Palomeras, who is in the construction technology department at UTSA, who we brought in as a result of some of the things that are going on here as well. Some of the things that we found.
That's kind of a funny thing because fulano, whoever they're gonna get you to do the work, whoever has basically a license, called a license electrician, that's able to pull the license is still gonna get fulano to do the work. So that, I mean, how you do the study? Number two.
Hold on, let me just make sure so that I understand what you're saying. What you're saying, as I understand it, is that the issue is not with contractors who are not, who don't know how to do the work. The issue is with fraud with the permits.
The issue is not who can do the work, the issue is who's got the license to pull the permit.
Right, well,
Because
that's,
if we go down, if you really wanna be honest with everybody here, to put a ceiling fan, you have to go pull a permit to put a ceiling fan.
right.
So that will nickel and dime everybody in this room to death. For two, if you get clear and deed title to all these properties in here, if something happens on a death deed or whatever, and or let's say you use the plumbing program to fix it, it very states at the very bottom that if something happens to the individual that actually pulled the money to get it fixed, and something happens to that individual, you have to repay that money back in full. Nothing's for free in this world.
Right.
Nothing.
So, two things, just so that I understand what you're saying. So, the first question has to do with that the permitting process is flawed, right?
No,
The fact that you're required to have permits?
The permitting process is there, it's not flawed, it's there to pull a permit. But the person that, if I have a license to pull a permit, I can pull a permit, I'm still gonna hire fulano to do the work.
General contractor.
A general contractor to
Okay.
do the work. It's the cost that I'm gonna charge to go over there, pull the permit, and I'm gonna pay fulano, whatever,
Okay,
to do the work.
so
So wouldn't it be better to get
So
fulano certified to pull the permit?
that's exactly what we're doing. That's exactly what's happening, right? That's why I said I need to be clear on what the question is. These individuals who are going to be brought in simultaneous, there's a number, this is just one small component of that, the one that UTSA is involved in. The rest of it has to do with becoming licensed, becoming all the other, but it's just, the part that UTSA is involved in just deals with bridging the understanding between old code, new code, and trying to fill the contractor gap. That's just one small part, but you're absolutely right. Individuals who didn't pull permits or don't have that is part of the process, is to bring those individuals along rather than be punitive and say, don't do this anymore. Say, wait a minute, let's see how we can get you underneath, doing things the right way. And your second question had to do with repayment on other programs.
You know the program, you just take the plumbing program and all that?
Right, so the transfer on death deed works like this. If you owe money, whether it's a mortgage, whether it's whatever it is, all that you end up inheriting is whatever the person that left it to you had in the first place, okay? So that's a very important distinction. In other words, if, let's say you don't own the property free and clear, you have a $20,000 or $50,000 mortgage. Just because you died doesn't mean the mortgage goes away. You sit in the shoes of whoever did. So if you owe 20 grand, you still owe 20 grand. The point is that what we find is that instead of having 7 people now that owe 20 grand, you have a person or 2 or whoever you left the house to. We find that the problem is not that people owe money. The problem is that the ownership is fractionalized and they cannot decide what to do. Since they can't decide what to do, taxes go unpaid, repairs go undone, etc., and that creates a downward spiral, and then in the end they lose the house, something happens, etc. So you're right, it's not an opportunity to wipe the slate clean, far from it. All that happens is you stand in the shoes of whoever transferred the property to you in the first place. So if they had liabilities, they still have liabilities. That doesn't change. What it does is it moves it out of probate. It moves it out of those other processes that require money, lawyers, probate court, etc. And then, at least hopefully creates a smooth transition over. So again, I just wanted to make sure that I understood the question and understood the concern to try to address it. And I don't know if I did or didn't, but
Man, that means that the 07 is gonna have nothing but high-paid people that, it's a lot of money you're gonna get out.
for what?
To get all these guys certified to live in this area, because the majority in this area are all the general contractors, or not, what is it, labor workers, all the electricians, all the guys that run line, all the cement, run the showers and everything, so you're gonna have this whole neighborhood.
Well, I think one of the things is to find out exactly what's going on. I mean, I don't think anyone has undertaken a systematic way to really find out the depth and the breadth of the problem. You might be absolutely correct, but we don't know for certain until we actually dig in.
They're not general contractors, they're subcontractors, so they're the ones that,
Yes,
So the general pulls a permit.
yeah, the general of the,
Pulls a
here.
permit, then
We're
gets.
just talking about the.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying, you're gonna have subcontractors become general contractors, and now them charging you $100 to do
Sir, can we move on to the next question?
What was that?
Go ahead, sir.
This might be a little bit off topic, but one thing I came across is that a lot of, I'm talking about the living, okay, because you're talking about the dead. A lot of living elders, they're up for like flipper guys, and they offer them $20,000 for the house, and they think it's a lot because they pay $10,000. God
Right.
knows what they're. But what I came across was that this was already happening in Phoenix, but now there's attorneys in Phoenix in which they don't look at the price of the market or anything, they look at the potential value. Because most of this area is downtown, so the potential value of the properties. Has anything like that been done here in San Antonio, where people start looking, like the city really screwed a lot of people, taking away their houses for the jail thing, the city did that, you got their county, the name for hope and all that. So they really, and forgive my French, they wronged, but they wronged the people because of the potential value of the areas. But is there anything in place to protect people who are approached by flippers? Because those guys are, I mean, we're getting little cards, we want to buy a
Yeah,
house.
for sure.
and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so this is an ongoing issue, right? And there's a number of different, we've uncovered a number of different concerns over and above all of that. And it's very aggressive. I mean, the short answer is, it's empirically proven that if someone wants to sell a house, they should always list it with an agent, because the agent has a code of ethics and they have to post it, they have to, and in many instances, these folks are they're told your house is in poor shape, it's not worth anything, etc. And so they're sort of, I mean, we tell people just don't do that, right? Obviously don't interact with these folks. You say, well, what's the harm in calling them and seeing? Well, the harm is, and we've uncovered a lot of issues, and actually in discussions with the district attorney, Joe Gonzalez, over this, but, strong arm tactics that, really border on fraud, right? And so